Thanks, everybody, for coming. My name is Keith Ellison. I'm the Attorney General for the state of Minnesota. And today we want to talk about a very critical and really important piece of legislation that we're introducing. Thank you, Representative Norris. Also, Senator Ann Johnson Stewart will be introducing in the Senate. And this is a critical piece of legislation involving Medicaid fraud. Everyone, no matter their income level, deserves access to high-quality, affordable health care. Medicaid, or medical assistance here in Minnesota is what we call it, helps over 1 million people in our state get that access. And we support this program with our tax dollars because we believe that when one Minnesotan is healthier, we are all healthier. We put that money behind our values. But that money sometimes attracts bad actors. When people commit Medicaid fraud, they're stealing from all of us. They're stealing health care from our most vulnerable neighbors. They're stealing good reputations of honest care providers, and they're stealing from our government. It is the job of my office and the federal government to hold Medicaid fraudsters accountable, and we are. Across the country, Attorney General offices house what is called Medicaid fraud control units, and Minnesota is no exception. Although we are exceptional in having one of the most effective units in the country. Since I was sworn in as Attorney General, we've won more than 300 convictions for Medicaid fraud and won over $80 million in judgments and restitution for Minnesota taxpayers. Big thanks to everybody who works in our Medicaid fraud unit, led by Nick Wonka. This is a highly specialized team of people who are very good at what they do. So good, in fact, that the federal government itself has recognized that our MFCU, Mafuku, has won more convictions than any other state with a comparable Medicaid budget. We can all be proud of this work, but we cannot rest on our laurels. Last year, I was proud to partner with you, Representative Norris, and Senator Johnson Stewart to introduce the Bipartisan Medicaid Medical Assistance Protection Act, or MAP, to provide more resources and tools for fighting Medicaid fraud. In a complicated budget year, the MAP Act didn't make it into law. Well, this moment we're in now calls for us to try again and do even more than we did before to get it passed. I'm pleased to announce today that with the support of Representative Norris and Senator Johnson Stewart, we are introducing a revised MAP Act 2.0 with even more resources and more tools to fight Medicaid fraud. First, let me talk about the additional resources that we're asking for. The MAP Act adds 18 dedicated specialized staff to our Medicaid fraud control unit, bringing the total number from 32 to 50. It's very important to make clear that the federal government matches every dollar we dedicate to fighting Medicaid fraud on a 3-to-1 basis. For every dollar Minnesota puts in, the feds put in 3. So we're looking for 18 new staff, and that sounds like a lot, but Minnesota only needs to pay for about 4 of those, about a quarter of that number. This is truly buy 1 and get 3 for free. Here's why all this is important. When the unit staffing level was last set at 32, Minnesota's total Medicaid budget was $13 billion. Now it's $20 billion, that's more than 50% higher. The referrals that the unit receives from state agencies and managed care organizations are on track to triple this year over last year. The recommendation of 18 additional staff comes directly from the Federal Department of Health and Human Services. In the last analysis of the unit, they recommended that we reach this staffing level by 2028. Yes, I know it's 2026, but this level of staffing will help us meet Minnesotans' rightful expectations now. They don't want us to wait. And as you know, State Director of Program Integrity, Tim O'Malley, recommended just 2 days ago that fraud-fighting resources be expanded into our office. This means that we can add these 18 additional fraud-fighting staff for only $1.2 million per biennium. And so now, I'd like to talk a little bit about the improved legal tools that we're asking for. The MAP Act 2.0 will close some legal loopholes that have allowed some fraudsters to avoid accountability. Right now, Minnesota law defines Medicaid fraud as presenting a false claim for reimbursement with intent to defraud. And that's it. Such a narrow definition is challenging for prosecutors because it does not capture all of the criminal conduct that can be part of a Medicaid fraud case. The MAP Act updates the definition of Medicaid fraud to clearly ban things like lying with the intent to defraud while enrolling as a provider, falsifying records about the delivery of services, or destroying records when you receive a request for those records from a state agency. The MAP Act will equalize penalties for fraud. Now, when I say equalize, what I mean is right now, if you defraud a private sector, the penalties are higher than from stealing from low-income people who use Medicaid. Right now, if you defraud Medicaid of $36 million, you're subject to the same penalty as if you defrauded it of only $36,000. So let me just say that again. Right now, if you defraud Medicaid of $36 million, you're subject to the same penalty as if you defrauded it for only $36,000. Because of a law that hasn't been updated in decades, we have this anomaly. Our bill creates new penalties for Medicaid fraud over $100,000 and over $1 million. Right now, Medicaid fraud is attractive for scammers because the current penalties for stealing from a private entity are far higher than stealing from the government, and we're fixing that. The MAP Act adds more legal tools to help investigate, prosecute major fraud schemes, like adding Medicaid fraud to our racketeering laws, giving our office the ability to subpoena financial records that we currently don't have and rely on county attorneys to do, expanding the statute of limitations so we can better go after long-term fraud schemes conducted over a period of years. So as I've told you, Minnesota's Medicaid Fraud Control Unit is a good investment. Now let me show you. In just last year, we investigated and successfully prosecuted one fraudster for falsely billing care services to the tune of $7 million. We reached a settlement with a substance abuse treatment nonprofit that had been overbilling services and won $8 million in restitution for Minnesota taxpayers. We successfully prosecuted a woman who was falsely claiming to provide personal care to her children, but instead was engaged in shocking acts of medical child abuse. She now is serving 39 years for her behavior, and where she will not be able to hurt children or steal from Medicaid again. With a track record like this, giving this vitally important unit more support is a no-brainer for people on either side of the aisle who are serious about fighting fraud. I look forward to working with the legislature from both parties and the governor to help pass the MAP Act as quickly as possible. And now let me introduce Representative Matt Norris.
Thank you. Thank you, Attorney General Ellison. It's great to be with all of you this morning. I'm Representative Matt Norris. I have the privilege of representing Blaine and Lexington in the Minnesota House of Representatives. You know, like so many Minnesotans, I am furious about the fraud that has been taking place here in our state. And that's the reason why I teamed up with the Attorney General's office to introduce this bill last year to beef up the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit. This bill has got bipartisan support in the House, and we actually did successfully pass it out of the House last year. Medical assistance fraud steals from the hardworking taxpayers across Minnesota who are working hard to make sure that we as a state have the resources needed to take care of the most vulnerable Minnesotans. Whether it's health care for low-income Minnesotans, child care assistance, Minnesotans are a generous people and want to make sure that those tax dollars that are going to the state end up supporting the programs and services they're intended to. When it doesn't, it's disgraceful, and we're here to help crack down on this kind of fraud. This bill does what Minnesotans expect us to do. It enhances our ability to investigate fraud, and it stiffens penalties for those who steal from government programs. As Attorney General Ellison mentioned, it's also a really effective use of our state dollars. We know we are in tight budget times, but there's a 3-to-1 match from the federal government. So when we're looking at what are some of the most cost-effective ways that we can fight fraud, this bill is at the top of the list. So simply put, this bill supports the work of catching people who steal from medical assistance and make sure that they are held accountable. And with that, we'll stand for questions.
Thank you. And I'd like to ask Nick Walker to join us. Is that all right, Nick? Yep. So any questions from the Free Independent American Press here today?
Attorney General Ellison, can you explain, obviously a lot of some of these high-profile fraud cases recently have been taken over by the U.S. Attorney's Office. Maybe ignore for the fact for a moment that there are a lot of prosecutors who have left that office, but can you explain why most of them were going there? Is it because it was a majority federal dollars? Is it because you didn't have enough of these people specialized in this, or because Minnesota's laws, as you described them, are weaker than the federal laws when it comes to fraud?
So today we're talking about healthcare fraud, Medicaid fraud. That's what we're talking about. There are other types of fraud that happen that are not Medicaid fraud related. When they're not connected to Medicaid fraud, then our authority is in another area. And so under Minnesota Statute 8.01, I can prosecute cases, and my office can prosecute them when the governor assigns me the case or one of the 87 county attorneys asks us to do the case. In that situation, outside of Medicaid fraud, I have to be brought in by the governor or the county attorneys. Obviously, the governor invoking my authority to be assigning me the case is going to be a rare event because we have elected county attorneys and we want to respect their prerogative to do the work that their voters elected them to do. So that's going to be a rare event. So normally we are brought in through the county attorneys. So I don't have the legal authority to go do a fraud case that involves stealing from a food program or stealing from a housing program or that. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, but autism, housing stabilization, aren't those Medicaid reimbursed programs? So would that fall in your purview?
Nick, you want to?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Nick Wonk. I'm the director of the Medicaid Fraud Unit. That's a good question. So a number of these investigations that you're speaking of, they originated as state and federal and joint investigations, right? Our investigators working with federal law enforcement. Our federal regulations require us, when that is the case, to not only cooperate with federal law enforcement, but to share that information with the U.S. Attorney's Office, which we do, not only because the regulations require it, but because it's the right thing to do. When the U.S. Attorney's Office expresses an interest in desire to prosecute the case, we are all for that. The federal government has many more resources than we do in state court, and if they're going to charge people in federal court where the penalties are higher, where it is easier to charge quickly than it is in state court, we're going to support that. They're going to bring their charges, but we are not going to bring a parallel state case because that's not a good use of our limited resources, and we're not going to get any additional penalties or restitution from bringing a state case.
If I may, just a quick follow-up, given the circumstances surrounding the U.S. Attorney's Office in this state right now, a lot of the people who were the leads on fraud cases have left. There are really few, a little more than a dozen prosecutors right now. Do you think that puts more onus on your office to take more of these cases in absence of, that office not being back to full strength yet?
We're happy to take any cases. There's some complications in the sense that with how the evidence is obtained, if the U.S. Attorney's Office is involved, for instance, if they get evidence through grand jury subpoenas, there's a process that they have to go through to share that evidence with us. But we are happy to take Any Medicaid fraud cases that are not being prosecuted federally, that present probable cause that people have committed crimes, and charge them in state court.
I had a follow-up on Caroline.
Wait a minute. I think you were first.
Have they sent you any cases since those resignations started?
No.
Okay, I was gonna ask a similar question, if there are extra demands on your office because of the departures of the U.S. Attorney's Office.
A little bit of a different question than whether they've actually sent us any cases. We are still working joint cases with federal law enforcement. Some of them that we previously believed may be charged by the U.S. Attorney's Office are a little bit more of an uncertain state now. We're happy to take those, but of course, if we take those with our current staff, that means other cases, we're not going to necessarily have the resources to move quickly. We will still move them, we will still charge them, but there's only so many people and so much time.
To be clear, the additional 18 people we're talking about here, are they more fall in the realm of investigators, or are they prosecutors? And maybe if there is a distinction, would then be investigators mean more just like helping, look into those referrals, and then maybe whether you guys would prosecute or the U.S. Attorney's Office would prosecute, how that would look?
The bulk of the staff will be investigators. Right now, what we need to move more cases and move them quicker are people who can get on the ground, go out, do interviews with providers, with recipients, review healthcare service records, and build those cases. So the bulk of this request will be investigators. There will also be prosecutors and legal support staff within it.
Could you speak to how many of the cases that you're working on have to do with 14 high-risk Medicaid services as opposed to other Medicaid programs?
I don't have an exact number for you, but it is the majority of them.
And do you have any specification on which programs or services?
We have open investigations into every single one of those 14 high-risk provider types.
Representative Norris, apologies, I did not watch the hearing for the IG bill yesterday, but it did stall again. Could you just speak to your understanding of why that happened and response to that?
Yeah. So we offered a number of amendments in the committee hearing yesterday. Two of them were accepted, but importantly, there was one amendment that was really critical to making sure that the bill is constitutional. It has to do with the appointment process for the Inspector General. That amendment, unfortunately, was not adopted. And so as a result, the DFLers on the committee didn't feel like it was responsible to send a bill that is still unconstitutional out of the state government committee. Talks are continuing. I have full confidence that if everybody engages in a problem-solving mindset, that we'll be able to work through some of the differences and ideas on that bill. I think, the Republicans yesterday mentioned, on many of the amendments that I brought forward, that they thought a lot of them had some real merit. And so I'm hopeful that we'll be able to continue those talks, figure out, if we need to massage some language here and there to get everybody on board, we can do that. But, that bill is certainly not dead by any means, even though it didn't pass on to the next committee yesterday. It still is sitting there in state government committee, and as soon as we're able to get some language that everybody can agree on, we can get that moving on to the next committee stop.
And this is, sorry, just a quick follow-up question about the open investigations. Around how many providers are involved in the sense of the dollar amount of fraud or waste or abuse?
I don't have a sense of the dollar amount because these are in the investigative stage. I can tell you we have over 200 open cases.
That's 200 providers.
Yes, that's 200 separate cases. Some of those are actually one person operating 4 or 5 separate agencies, and that's going to be contained within a single investigation. But we have over 200 open cases, and at the very least, it's 200 open providers, some agencies, some individuals.
On the point you just made about individuals who might be operating multiple, I know that's what James Clark has said before, that there's this enterprise effect. I'm wondering if you can speak to, is that what you're seeing, that somebody is, stealing from X, Y, Z program all within those 14 high-risk ones?
We have a number of investigations, and we have charged a number of cases in the past where someone may have agencies that provide multiple types of services within those 14 high-risk programs. You may have one home care agency that provides 5 different types of home care services, but we also have cases where you have a home care agency with multiple services, and then the same person is a sole owner or part owner of a mental health agency or an autism agency. And so we've had a lot more referrals of that nature, and as you can imagine, that takes a lot more work for an investigator than a single agency case does, which is another reason, why we need these extra people to the extent that we do, because the cases are not only growing in number, but they're growing in complexity. If you have 3 or 4 agencies you're investigating as part of a single case, that's a lot more records to review, that's a lot more people to interview, and that's a case that takes, quite frankly, a lot more resources to effectively build it in a way that we can prosecute it in state court.
And those providers that are being investigated, do any of them have ties to beating our future defendants?
I'm not going to comment on those type of things.
Nick Paul, Box Center. I'm just curious. I heard the president use the 18 billion number again last night. Joe Thompson, before he left, talked about 9 billion. Have you, I don't get in front of you for news conferences very often. Do you have a dollar figure that your office believes fraud that has walked out the door over the last half dozen years or so in Minnesota?
We would rely on what is in our charge cases and recoveries that we report to the federal government. Outside of that, it would be engaging in speculation that I'm not going to do right now.
There was some developments this week as it relates to autism, the program being extremely vulnerable to fraud. Can you talk about what, I know you don't talk about open investigations, but your concerns about that specific program in Minnesota?
I mean, I think that we've had other people from certainly the Department of Human Services who've shed some light on some of the vulnerabilities in the autism program and in a number of the other programs. I share a lot of those concerns, and I'm just going to leave it at that for right now.
Did you see red flags all over the 14 programs?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
So, Attorney General Ellison, or who's there, you can.
Nick Walker.
What was that?
Again? Nick.
Yeah. Well, is your name Nick?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I wasn't about to miss
You're
your
good.
name. Okay. Either Nick or Attorney General Ellison, buy one, get 3 free, what is the cost to the state budget, even with that in mind, the 4 FTEs effectively?
Yeah, so what's that exact number, John? I think it's 1.2 million per biennium, 1.2 million per biennium.
And you, and maybe House, does that seem reasonable in this?
Yeah, sorry, that's per year.
Okay, so like 2.4 in a
Yeah,
budget.
yeah.
Given the budget constraints, and obviously it should be a supplemental budget item, do you feel that there's an appetite to spend this money?
Yeah, I do think that everybody here at the Capitol understands that shoring up some of these vulnerabilities related to fraud and then investigating the fraud should be a budgetary priority. Obviously, there will be budget negotiations that occur, but my hope is that, given the 3-to-1 match from the federal government, that when we see what dollars are allocated to fighting fraud this year at the Capitol, I think this bill is a really strong contender to be right at the top of that list.
Attorney General Ellison, congressional Republicans lay a lot of blame for the fraud in Minnesota here squarely at the feet of Governor Walz in your office here. You're going to be testifying next week in front of Congress. What can we expect to hear from your office here? And, why did this go unchecked for as long as it did?
Well, let me just tell you, I don't really have any comment about what I'm going to say next week because, quite frankly, we're still working on it. But what I will say is that one of the real barriers to trying to protect the public dollar is the politicization of this issue. It's one of the things that concerns me so much. I wish we could just get out of the politics of this, not make it some sort of a bipartisan cudgel, and just try to protect the public dollar. If we work together, we can protect the public dollar. If we try to say, maybe I can get an advantage in the election by blaming you, then it's going to cause a lot of problems and certainly take us off the right track. So, thank you. All right, everybody. We'll see y'all later. Take care now.